Shalom and welcome. Welcome to our Freedom series on this very special day. I'm Pastor Susan from Kehilat Bethlechem Messianic Synagogue here in Hyderabad. And I'm very excited for those of you who have joined us now, as well as those of you joining us later. We're really praying that this series would be a breakthrough for some of us. And in the season that we're in, that we would be hearing from God really clearly how it is that He wants us to break free out of old habits, out of mindsets and ideologies that keep us from the freedom that Messiah Yeshua has called us to walk into. And what better season to be doing this than the season of Pesach? It's incredible how close we have come to the days of Pesach. We're just a couple of days, more than a week, I think. And I really pray that these are exciting times for you. These are times that you should have great anticipation, that we are not just going into a season of Pesach like any other time. The sages say that whenever we celebrate Pesach, we should be able to experience it just like we were in the land of Egypt and we have experienced deliverance. So if you have not known anything about the season of Pesach, which is a Hebrew word for Passover, when you go through our sessions and you go through our teachings, you will learn that this is the biblical festival, the Lord's festival of Passover, that is coming in about 10 days' time, actually less than 10 days. And it is a season of deliverance. It is a season of redemption. And the story of the coming out of Egypt is actually a blueprint of the redemption that Hashem has for each one of us and us as a people of God and everything that's happening in the world today. But for that, each one of us needs to experience this on a personal level also. So in the Freedom series, if you're joining us for the first time, we have been building up to this session. So you can always go back to the YouTube channel and go back to the previous sessions. But if you've been with us from the beginning, thank you for joining us every week. And I have been hearing testimonies of how this has been helping people. I've been hearing testimonies from people who have already gone through the series many times, but hearing it again is what we always say here, that it's like peeling an onion. We go through cycles of redemption, cycles of healing and deliverance, like we peel an onion. We go through one layer and then we go through another layer. And so I was very excited to hear from even the people who have been through these sessions with me many times before, going through a deeper layer of deliverance. And that really blessed my heart because I can see that, God knows our hearts. And if we seek Him, He is able to bring us out of all of the darkness that is inside of us and actually experience the goodness of God in the land that we live in. But if this is your first time with us, I have heard some testimonies of how they did not see things so deeply before. They knew something about forgiveness, but they didn't understand the depth of what it was. And I really have heard from them, and I also know that this is just the beginning. I'm teaching very basic aspects right now, but we are burdened in speaking because we feel the body of Messiah really needs to grow and grow out of these mindsets and these pagan ways and the ways of darkness that we may have developed over our lifetime, but we need to know how to come out of it now. Thank you for joining me this week. I remember last week I said that I will be finishing the topic of bitterness and walking into something called self-bitterness, where we're not bitter necessarily with somebody else, but we have very negative thoughts and even anger and hatred towards ourselves. But before we get into bitterness, I am going to talk about something for a few minutes, which is very connected to self-bitterness. And that is because of a burden that I had. And after the burden, I also heard from several people, which seemed that, like I said, these are very basic topics I'm speaking. So if we had live sessions, bitterness could take even a couple of days if we really went into the different ways that it manifests in our life. But one of the tricky situations that many people find themselves in is abusive circumstances, where you are faced with an abuser. Now, if you're wondering what I mean by abuse, abuse is actually where you're treated cruelly, especially if you're treated cruelly by somebody repeatedly. Now, abuse could be physically, it could be sexually, it could be mentally, it could be neglect, it could be being exploited. But it is in a situation where you are not treated respectfully, and not even respectfully, you could be treated very cruelly, you could be facing violence, and you could be somebody who's living with somebody or working with someone who has an abusive nature and inflicts this violence and cruelty to you repeatedly. Now, scripturally, we must not remain in a place of abuse. And this is tied to the self-bitterness that I will be touching on today. And that is, we must have respect for ourselves. And so if we are being abused physically, if we are in an abusive relationship where you are mentally and emotionally being manipulated and you do not experience freedom in the relationship, and abuse could be even verbal abuse. You and I are not expected to be under that type of circumstance. And in fact, the scripture says that we should not partner with it. Now, I'm aware that every situation is different. And so if you think you are in a relationship like that, I recommend that you go towards your pastor or a spiritual leader who could help you understand how to come out of that situation, because every situation is very different. But if you are in a relationship where somebody consistently beats you up, hurts you physically, sexually, this is not a relationship that you should keep under the wraps and as a secret. This is actually the power of the abuser, where you won't let anybody else know about it. So you actually partner with this violence by letting it happen again and again. I am not going to give any broad explanations of what to do, because it really depends on your situation. But if you find yourself unhappily in an abusive situation, and this is not uncommon in the body of Messiah, rather it's very common. Because I'm speaking to people from all over the world, I really encourage you to go to your pastor or your spiritual leader to help you understand how to come out of it. Don't remain under it, especially if that person is physically or sexually abusing you. Now, I am not going to talk about the actual physical decision you need to make. I would like to go into something a little deeper, and that is how you disarm the abuser in your heart. You see, you could remove yourself physically from that abusive situation. You could be in a marriage that is very damaging, and your spouse is physically inflicting pain on you, or you could have somebody who is a drunk or a substance abuse, somebody who doesn't have their senses and physically harms you. And you could actually remove yourself from that situation. You could remove yourself from an employer who is verbally very abusive and go to another job. You could break off a relationship with friends or girlfriends or boyfriends who harm you, and there are very manipulative type of people. You could remove yourself physically, but you may still be in a victim mode. You may still be the abused. And I would like to address that today with great caution, because every situation is different. But I'd like you to hear a few principles that I feel in my heart you should know. Even if you are removed from the relationship physically, very often, if we do not know how to forgive, we still remain as the abused victim. The abused victim is a person who is still impacted by the abuse of the abuser. Now, if you've had physical wounds, you can get healed of the physical wounds. If you've removed yourself away from a relationship with somebody, you no longer have to hear the words that come out of their mouth. You could go to a temporary place of peace. I would call it temporary, because yes, we have removed ourselves from any more repeated abuse, but there is the effect that it's had upon us. Now, to remove ourselves from a state of being a victim or the abused, where we are damaged and wounded, it is very important that we learn to forgive. In one of this another session that I'm in, I heard from a girl that really brought out the truth of what I'm trying to say. We have said that we definitely have areas of forgiveness and we do have bitterness in our heart. When we think of someone and there is pain in our heart, or when you think of a memory, something that happened in your life and it leaves a very negative feeling, something that you hope not to think about, something that you wish didn't happen to you. These are still areas of pain in our memories that require us to go through repentance and forgiveness. She also said that this is what I've heard from many people. When we go through certain days in a year, there would be a recount of, okay, last year, this is what somebody did to me at this time. This year, this is the time when this person hurt me, last year. Now, this is a record of wrong. And many people think that it's okay. But this is a very clear sign that we don't have a free heart. We are not free of the pain that somebody has inflicted upon us. And we're not able to be a whole human being and enjoy the life ahead. The event is over. We have removed ourselves maybe from the situation that caused us pain, but we're still a victim. We're still experiencing pain. You see, aside of dealing physically, what to do with the abusive relationship you're in, if we don't first of all understand that without forgiveness, I will be tormented for life. And this is what many people are experiencing. Being tormented for life causes me to get into things to keep my mind away from it. People end up in substance abuse. They become addicts to all kinds of things, food addicts, movie addicts, everything to remove those memories that keep coming back. You could become a bitter person. I was reading a story of a testimony just today of a lady who was able to go through life with a very bitter mother-in-law. But in the last days of her life, because of the cancer, she started to open up her heart only to this daughter-in-law. Otherwise, she was the most bitter person. Nobody liked to speak to her, not even someone who was called to her house to work. But in doing so and showing love to her, it revealed the story of where she was very, very hurt by some church that she was part of being accused of something that wasn't true. But she turned her heart away from God and became a very bitter human being. So this is what happens when we don't forgive and release our offenders and even our abusers from our heart. You could be free from the physical situation. This story is a true story of how this mother-in-law became a very bitter person. She could not have a relationship with anyone. She was so consumed with her hatred and anger. And it took, when she was very, very sick and helpless, the persistent love of the daughter-in-law and the lessons that the daughter-in-law learned to love the unlovable, knowing that there was something inside of her heart, and to show compassion that broke the heart of that mother-in-law, and she opened her heart to the Lord. And she was able to hear from the Lord that he loved her and she could return to him. It was wonderful to read that story, but you see, the principles are just the same. We must let go. This is really important because many of you, by not forgiving the abuser, are actually empowering the abuser, even if you're not physically with that person. This abuse mindset is empowered by your lack of forgiveness. You could remove yourself from an abusive relationship, but because of the pain that is inflicted upon you, you could live a life that continues in tremendous physical sickness. Unforgiveness and pain locked up in the heart like this makes us very, very sick. You must be very familiar with the book of Proverbs that says a merry heart is like good medicine. A cheerful heart is good medicine. So if we have pain locked up inside of ourselves because of the terrible situations we've been through, and when I'm talking about abuse, it's when it's repeatedly happened to you, or it could be even happening to you right now. You could be stuck inside an abusive relationship with your spouse or with your children or with someone in your life that you think you cannot come out of, and you keep yourself there. But do you know that you can disarm the abuser? The way to disarm the abuser is to walk through the steps of forgiveness till what that person does no longer emotionally affects you. You become people, even if you become free of the abuse because of the pain in our heart, and we have not released the pain through forgiveness, we become unable to trust. So we never have deep relationships. When we don't have deep relationships, we're very lonely. And that loneliness, we want to be with people, but there's a big barrier. And we don't know how to blend with another person in a safe way, because this barrier is the mistrust. This mistrust is because we have not gone through the steps of forgiveness and forgiving every single memory, every single root of whatever has happened to you, whether it is real or not real, whatever you have perceived from it. If we don't go through every single root, these things remain in our heart. And this mistrust is this barrier that we have because we're not able to take any more pain. There is pain still in our heart. So we don't have deep relationships. We've been talking here from Kehilat Bethlechem about God's vision of uniting the body of Messiah, where we have deep, committed relationships to one another because we believe that we are part of one body. Does that mean that we're all going to treat each other so nicely? Not necessarily, because we're all human beings and we're all walking through these things. We're working out these things in our life. So in the body of Messiah, we have people who are hurt. We call them like prickly thorns because of what they've gone through. They're not so safe. But how am I going to know how to build a relationship with that person? I myself, first of all, have to be completely free of all the pain that I've gone through in the past, because we're going into a new season. Pesach is the crossing of the Red Sea. We're going into a new season. We're going to a new place. And it is our prayer here in Kehilat Bethlechem that you join with us and cross over, come out with us. If we don't get rid of the pain of what the abusive situation has done to us, you could be a child who's been through a very abusive parenting. There is extremely abusive parenting. There are different levels of abuse. It could be verbal. It could be neglect. You could have had parents at home, but they just completely neglected you. Neglect is also a form of abuse. What happens if we don't forgive these things that have happened to us? We end up with no peace all of our life. We also become very regretful people. And I will be touching a little bit on what this regret is in the issue of self-bitterness. Now, I could go on talking more and more and more about this and never come to the topic of self-bitterness. But I would just like to leave these basic principles with you, that you would pick it up. You see, one of the things that I have slowly began to understand, I mean, I may have known it mentally, but through interactions with people, not everybody wants freedom. And I'm praying that you would take the courage to obey God and come out of the darkness inside of our hearts. Many of us think that God will remove us from it. But actually, God has given us all the tools we need to come out of all of these dark memories that we have in our heart. We want to go to services. We have to plaster on a smile. We have learned spiritual behavior. Some of us don't know how to do that, so we come as raw as we are. And because we come so raw, we get poked back because of some treatment from someone else. And so we feel like, I'm not going to go back to a church again. I'm not going to go back to a synagogue again. They're not real people, and I don't want to get along with them anymore. It's just better to be by myself. These are the issues that we are longing to be healed in the body of Messiah. And it takes you and I to do that. You become a free and redeemed person. You are a redeemer, a Messiah to your community. You're going ahead. You will be able to help so many other people who may have gone through things worse than you. But because you have tasted what freedom is like. And what am I talking about? Where you take up every memory that has haunted you, every past experience that leaves you feeling very bitter, that is something that you're hoping you could forget. Where there's pain when you think about some people. It could be spiritual leaders. It could be anything in the world. I am speaking to you today that you could pick up every single memory and release forgiveness to every way that you have been hurt. And you will experience freedom as God heals your pain. This is the key to life. You and I are going to live ahead, and we want to live long lives. We want to be here in the world. And like one of the pastors who I've always remembered what he said, I don't want to escape the trouble. I want to be the one that when there's a fire, I'm equipped to be a fireman and go in and rescue people. And that's my prayer that all of us are in, that no longer are we trying to escape this world. We're not trying to escape these terrible relationships we're in, my terrible marriage, my terrible problems with my children, my horrible job. I'm giving you tools to overcome these situations. With the power of forgiveness, you become unoffendable. That is great power. But that is a calling of a believer, to become unoffendable. The reason why we find small things so difficult to get over is because we have unforgiveness in our heart about many other things. And so little things affect us too much. We're called the sensitive ones. I'm very sensitive. I don't know how long you want to be sensitive, because you cannot be an effective worker. You'll be easily damaged. You can easily get hurt. You and I need to move out of a victim mode, use the principles of the Bible. And one of the principles of the Bible that James actually says in the book of James, and it's come to my heart, so I'm just going to read that out now. In the book of James, chapter 5, it says in verse 13, is anyone among you suffering? Let him pray. If anyone is cheerful, let him sing praises. Is anyone among you sick? Let him call for the elders of Messiah's community and let them pray over him. Verse 15, the prayer of faith will save the one who is sick. And then verse 16 says, confess your offenses to one another and pray for one another so that you may be healed. The effective prayer of a righteous person is very powerful. Confess your offenses to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. This is another spiritual principle that many of us in the body of Messiah have not grown to understand its power, where we will overcome what we've gone through and not remain where we are and keep these unforgivenesses as trophies. They're not trophies. They're evil spirits of bitterness. Don't hold them as trophies. I will not talk to this kind of people. I won't tolerate these type of people. I will not come to any congregation. I am my own person. These are not trophies, please. These are very dark spirits of bitterness. And the only person who gets destroyed in the process is myself. And so with that, I'd like to move to self-bitterness. And if this has helped you in any way to come out of your abusive relationships, like I said, if it is something that you need to be removed of physically, please get the help of a spiritual leader to know how to do that, or maybe, an elder. But I am talking not about how you will handle the relationship physically. I'm saying first to disarm yourself, disarm the abuser from consistently hurting you by forgiveness. I'd like to move to self-bitterness, but with the time, I know that I will not get through all of it. And it's also a very extensive topic, but I hope to just get into the beginning. We went through the stages of bitterness over the last 2-3 weeks, and we looked at how bitterness is not just something that stays stagnant in us, but rather it grows. And so we did look at someone who gets into anger, speaks bad words, gets into fist fights, or even murders someone with their words, or physically murder someone. It's not something that happened overnight. It began with getting offended with somebody. But this type of bitterness towards others is also something that we can do to ourselves. So right at the beginning, I want to tell you, and I hope that they'll be able to put up that PowerPoint with the stages of bitterness. The way that we treat ourselves could be in the same way that we get bitter with someone else. We could be upset about something with ourselves, and then we may go to the next level where we start to resent ourselves. And that means we just basically don't like ourselves. Retaliation, it's some of us might think, how do we retaliate with ourselves? I will get into all that. And then we treat ourselves worse than retaliation. We actually become very angry. How do we know we're angry? It often comes out with our words, and we express this anger towards ourselves. And if we don't do something about it, by the time we speak words that are very evident, we're upset with ourselves, and we don't cap it there, it could get worse, where we actually begin to hate ourselves. Hatred is where two people can't be in the same room. So what happens when I hate myself? I really decide that I don't want to be with myself anymore. Some people literally detach themselves from themselves. They don't even know who they are. They get into different kinds of personalities, so they're not the same person everywhere you meet them. And if you really hate yourself and you don't do something with this frustration and anger towards yourself, you can become violent with yourself. And we do see people become violent. You may be one of them, where you inflict pain on your own body. You could do that by not eating healthy food and keeping yourself from eating. And there are diseases like anorexia and bulimia where you don't feed food to your body. Please, let me tell you, that is someone who absolutely has no respect for themselves. Or there are people who inflict cuts and bruises on themselves, maybe not all the time. Maybe when you're very angry, you quickly move to hitting yourself, banging yourself up, cutting your body, but you're showing out this deep resentment towards yourself. It's coming out not only in your words and anger, it's coming out as violence upon yourself. And it could lead to murder, which in the case of self-bitterness is suicide, where you just want to kill yourself and you don't want yourself to live anymore. No, that's not very nice to hear about. These are very painful things. And what hurts us the most is in the body of Messiah, many of us are struggling and suffering with this sickness. And that's the truth. And I really just pray that you would know this is not a good thing. It's not an admirable thing, and it is not what God has for his people. But like I said, not everybody seems to want to take the pain to walk into freedom. And it is my prayer that you would come along with us. You would work with us. We can't do it for you. It's something, when I put the principles across, it's something that you desire for yourself, but you don't have to do it alone. We can walk with you so you could come out of this terrible plague of self-bitterness and self-hatred, self-loathing. So what is the self? What am I always talking about when we say self? Well, according to the dictionary, a self is a unique identity. It's a person. And so when we say myself or I am talking about an individual identity. According to the psalmist in Psalm 139, God is the one who has made this identity, this separate individual. So I want us to go straight to Psalm 139. And let's go through the psalmist who expresses his heart of thanksgiving to God. And he says, "For you have created my conscience. You knit me together in my mother's womb." So I want to stay right here in this verse and show you that the first part of dealing with self-bitterness is the acceptance that it is actually God who was involved in the knitting together of who you are in your mother's womb. Yes, there is a science that is involved. There is a biological process of a father and mother, and there is the mother who carries the cells from either side. But if you and I are really honest, the way that a baby is formed in the human womb is nothing but a miracle. When you were formed in your mother's womb, your mother was the human carrier. She was the physical vehicle, but nobody else was there. Nobody could even see you. You were just a bunch of cells, and there is a creator who began to stitch you together. One of the things that we do a lot of this in Wellspring, and so I'm sorry we are not able to do this online, but we look heavily on the medical side. And so right at the beginning, no, we're not the beginning, we're actually the end. But I haven't said this before. If you are interested in this ministry of the Freedom Series, which is actually called Wellspring Ministries of India, we are part of Wellspring Ministries in Alaska. Apart from contacting us for counseling, you could also contact the same ministry in the US, which goes through training to train you to be a Wellspring counselor like we are. And so if you're interested in that, you can contact us because the medical side is incredible. When you look at medicine and you look at the construction of the human body, I would say on the earth, there is nothing more miraculous than a human being. The way our body works, the way the systems operate, your brain, your heart, the doctors say, and I remember one doctor saying, what makes the heart start and what causes, or the moment when the heart stops, it's nothing to do with the doctor. He has no power over that. If the heart decides to stop and there is no more life, that's nothing to do with the doctor. There's somebody else involved, and we know who that is. So here the psalmist begins to express his thanksgiving to God that he is created by God himself. And the construction of which part of the DNA of the mother, you see characteristics of a grandfather, you see, oh, this child has got the grandmother's hair. This child has got, oh, this doesn't come from me. This hair color has come from his grandparents. Now, who decides how this DNA comes together? Who decides how your nose is going to look like? And the shape of your ears or the texture of your hair, like mine. It's not me, but it's not my mother and father either. And that is what is so beautiful about this psalm, that many of us reject in the nations because we have gone through experiences right from being conceived in a mother's womb and not being wanted. So we have experienced self-rejection and self-bitterness even from our conception. But I would like you to see this verse. Let's go to the next verse. The psalmist, after talking about being knitted, stitched, he says, I praise you, for I am awesomely, wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows that very well. My soul knows that very well. Let's go to verse 15. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. The depths of the earth. And then it says, your eyes saw me when I was unformed, and in your book were written the days that were formed, when not one of them had come to be. Verse 17. How precious are your thoughts, O God? How great is the sum of them? Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of the sand. When I am awake, I am still with you. The psalmist has experienced the goodness of God in being created by God and being created for a purpose and being created by somebody who is way above this world. All the days of our life are written in the book before any one of them came to be. He has a revelation of being fearfully and wonderfully made. He has expressed his thanksgiving and his humility that he's not made himself, but he's actually come into the world because of the Creator. Self-bitterness is the opposite of this. Self-bitterness is any way that we belittle ourselves. Self-bitterness is any way you put yourself down. Self-bitterness is any way that you negate the greatness of God and how you've been created and who you are as a person. Now, many people that I've been speaking to over the few years often don't know why they are so consumed with self-hatred. Many of them are situations that come up because of some problem, but they end up in the situation. And when we work through many things, we find that fundamentally at the bottom of all this is just a deep hatred to oneself or a dislike towards oneself. And some people actually hate themselves to the point of having a history of trying to commit suicide. If you have suicidal thoughts, if your response to a problem is, well, I just better die. When you go through a problem and you think, and this is not new here in India, so I'm going to use terminologies that I hear around here. I don't know how it is in your nations. It may be just the same, but these are the words that people say. When they go through a problem or a situation or something is tormenting them, they say, just kill me. I don't want to live anymore. I hate this life. I hope I sleep and never wake up. If somebody can just poison me, nobody wants me. I hope to die early. And people not only say that, but they even try to do that. I would like to just remind you that if somebody says this, do not take it lightly. They are consumed with some, not just self-bitterness, but also some kind of guilt and shame and regret. And it's consuming them. And the problem is when they go through something very serious and very deep, they often tip over and actually attempt suicide. This is actually sometimes thought of as a very pious thing, surprisingly. Some people think it's just a very humble way to handle life. Just kill me, you all will be happy. And we think we get it's a very poor me attitude. Some people think that it's just a passing phase and now I'm out of it and I'm fine. But it's definitely a sign of a spiritual cancer of self-hatred. The problem that we have with this right at the beginning, I'm saying, is it's the opposite of what the psalmist was expressing. It is the opposite of faith in God. It is the antithesis to faith in God. The psalmist was able to accept that God created him and expressed his praise to God for who he was. Knowing that God created him, God knew what he was created for. God is the one who's ultimately in control. And he said, how vast is your sum of your thoughts? It's just too great. So when we have these type of mindsets where we put ourselves down, we walk in self-bitterness, we do things to hurt ourselves, we do things that is evident that we don't want to live, or we want to kill ourselves or hurt ourselves, it is an antithesis to faith. It means we're not walking in faith. We're walking in self-hatred. Now, self-hatred can take many, many forms, which I will touch on more next week because they take a little bit of explanation. And why would I explain it? Because I would like you to really, it's like a thermometer. I'm going to have you take a thermometer and check, is this really how I think? And if it is how I think, I can say, bingo, the temperature is high. I need treatment. I need God to help me come out of it. But self-hatred comes in the form of self-rejection. It comes in the form of self-pity. It comes in the form of self-loathing. And it's in a way that we don't do anything to take care of ourselves. We walk around like we won't do anything, even to some people don't even do anything about their health or their dressing. Some people do things in a bad way so that somebody can reject you, and then you can feel bad about it. Now, I'm not going to get into that, though. That is usually how we go into it. I didn't want to get into that today because that will take a little bit of time, and we're not going to be able to cross that whole section today. What I would like you to go back with today is any way that you put yourself down, any way that you look down on yourself or think that you're less, is self-bitterness. Self-bitterness also comes because of memories of pain. That is why this is so linked to the topic of bitterness, because you may have done something or gone through something where there is guilt and there is shame. You're definitely dealing with shame when you're a person who doesn't like who you are to come out in the open. And you have a lifestyle of hiding. The lifestyle of hiding and not wanting to be transparent. Now, you don't have to be transparent with the whole world, but there may be a community of friends or your believers or your pastors where you want to be a transparent person, but you keep hiding, especially when you do something wrong, especially when you fail. Well, that's an issue of shame. You're dealing with shame. Self-bitterness also comes with the amount of regrets that we carry. Now, some people think regret is fine. What's wrong if I regret? Only if I regret will I make sure that I don't do it again. I regret the way I parented my children. That's self-bitterness. I regret the way I handled my first job. That's self-bitterness. I regret what I did when I was a child, and I wish I had not done that now that I have grown up. Self-bitterness. I regret what I did in the early years of my life as a believer when I didn't know anything. And now I know, but I really regret what I've done this last 10 years. This is self-bitterness. What is wrong with this? This is damaging to ourselves. These are areas we want to come out of. Another very clear form of self-bitterness is if you're in the habit of cursing yourself. This could be on a daily basis, or you could be somebody who just walks around saying that about yourself all the time, or when you go through some kind of problem and you ultimately, even if somebody does something to you, even if somebody hurts you, what you do is inflict curse upon yourself. I'd like to tell you at the beginning, cursing yourself is cursing God. Because it is God who has made you, it is God who's sustaining you, and it is God who has a plan for your life. Now, the opposite of self-loathing, self-hatred, some people think, so we should think we're so great? No, we don't. We don't need to think we're so great. So some people say it's a humble thing to walk around as poor me and denying myself and saying I'm a useless and I'm a worm and God is so great and I'm just a worm. This is not a spiritual thing. This is not biblical. So some people come and say, so what should I say? I'm so great. I should love myself, pay attention to myself, don't think about others. No, you see, these are two sides of the swing. We either go this way or we go this way. Both of them, whether you put yourself down or you walk in pride, is part of self-bitterness. Why is that? Because it's the opposite in both directions. It's the opposite of accepting how God has made you. So what is humility? Humility is not I beat myself up, say bad things about myself, act like I'm a nobody, dress up like a tramp. That's not humility. Humility is accepting that God made you and being the best you. The way God has made you, you accept that and you own up to your life and you be the best you. The reason why this is very difficult, maybe in the Asian community, and why this could be still a heavy plague in the body of Messiah, is because when we come from the Asian side, we have big problems with comparison right from the time we are born. I would even say not born, even from the time we're conceived. We do not come from our pagan background. We don't come from a community or a culture that values life. Many of us know that when a baby is conceived in the mother's womb, they have already decided that it better not be a girl. And so there is rejection of the self right from conception. Does a baby know? Absolutely, the baby knows. The baby is inside the mother's womb, but the baby is in the world. And the baby can pick it up. There will be conflicts outside. There will be rejection of the baby. Maybe the baby is conceived when the mother was not going through a good time or did not expect it, or even through terrible circumstances of rape, where the baby is not wanted by the mother. The baby has already gone through a self-rejection. So when we come from the pagan world that does not value life, that every human life is created by the Creator, every human life is a spark from God and is going to go through a journey in life of being connected back to God by being the best that that person is created to be. We already go through the self-rejection and self-hatred right from the womb. Then we know that from our culture, especially here in India, it is very common in many cultures here that from the time the baby is born, we have already decided what we want the baby to be. So let's say the baby is a girl. There are many communities where that baby will be unwanted right from the start. So that person never comes to experience the beauty of who am I and what am I here in the world for. They go through tremendous self-bitterness right from the start. Also, we go in through what is very common here in India, the rat race of comparison and competition. This is very reflected in our education system, where our education system is not often, I'm not saying everywhere, but most places, does not cater to discovering who the child is, to find out how God has made the child, and what are the giftings and the leanings of that child so that child can fulfill his or her destiny. Very often, right from the time a child is born, the child goes through a comparison. You're only good if you match up with this person, and if you don't match up with that person, then you're not so good. And so there is an environment of never discovering or accepting, like the psalmist, that I am created by God and I have a destiny in this world and I need to develop myself and become the best me. I started the session saying the self is defined as a unique identity you have in the world today, right? We all want to have a unique identity number, a unique identification. And each person now is a number. And this number should be unique to me. I want you to know you're not a number. You are a human being created in the image of God. So the unique person that I am, we are often not born into a community or an environment where the focus then of us as adults is to see who is this person and who is this person created to be, which means I really need to go through life with my child. And every child, like I've said before with us, we have weaknesses and we have strengths. And we find ways to train from young to strengthen the weak areas of the child and strengthen the strong areas. So, my child is not good at music, but that child is learning music really fast. So you're not so good, you better quickly learn a music. And maybe my child is not a musician. Is it good to learn music? Yes, but maybe my child is more of a technical mind. I remember one of my relatives when I was very young, when we used to visit where he lived, he was scolded a lot. He was always getting into trouble. One of the problems with him was whenever we bought a toy, and we also bought one for him, if we bought it in the morning and we're all enjoying playing with it, by evening, the toy was in pieces because all he wanted to do was find out what is inside the toy. He just couldn't play with the toy. He was always dismantling everything. So he got into a lot of trouble. People couldn't see who he was. They didn't even recognize who he was. We couldn't see. And I do remember my father saying, we shouldn't be doing this. This is not the right way to treat him. But he just seemed to always want to open up everything and what we call break the toy. So in the adult world, you ruined the toy. You wasted my money. But what was the child doing? You would know that the course that he took after his graduation, I forget the name of it, but basically it's all about all the circuits inside something. And we were laughing together saying, he was always like that, He's one of those circuit people. I'm very sorry, I forgot the name of the course, but it's one of those circuit people always fixing circuits inside everything, doing what makes the machine work. He does the inside work. And I just remember that our children, when they come into the world, have come with something in them. And we go through life to find out who is this unique identity. Now, there are obviously weaknesses that the community is to help train in righteousness. But many of us, especially when we come from an Asian community, we do not know how to accept who we are. So we, first of all, do not have the basic faith that God has created us. And we need to accept that. That is faith, where I believe God made me. I am made by God. He is still God today. And so we go through a culture, and especially our education system in India, never discovering who we are, but having to match up with someone or something that we're being compared with. This is what causes us to go through this swing of pride, because when I compare with someone who's not as good, I think I'm good. So my identity comes only in the comparison. I'm good at this. He's not. Okay, I feel good about myself. But that's pride. But when I compare with someone who's way better than me in something, maybe something I always want to do, but they're doing it better than me. It's something I always want to do, but I seem to fail. That person is really good. Then what do? I hate myself. And I will also hate that person. And so we do not get our identity from how God has made us. So we do not respect who we are and live in that identity. Rather, we find our identity by comparing. When we compare, we could go up or we could go down, and we swing like this through life. Every relationship is a strain, because you could be here or you could be there. Some days I'm very happy. Some days I find somebody's done something good and I'm just so angry and upset with myself. This is very stressful. This is bondage. This is not freedom. And so as we come to the close of today's session, if you find that this defines you, if you say, Pastor Susan, this sounds just like me. I smile on the outside, but secretly in my heart, I'm like this. I talk to everybody, but in my heart, I think like this. I want you to know that you're not alone. I want you to know that you're not the only person, and you don't need to be ashamed or afraid. We are here to help you walk out of that. You don't need to compare with anyone. Let's start at the beginning, like the psalmist said, and that is to accept that it is God who made you. Yes, it may appear in the physical realm that you are an accident. My parents weren't expecting me. My parents never had time for me. They rejected me right from the time I was born because I was a girl. They favored the boy and not me. This all could have happened physically because of the failings of mortal human beings. But I want you to know that you're not a biological process. Yes, maybe your mother was not expecting you, but you came into the world because God decided you're going to come into the world. And you won't leave the world until God says that you're going to leave the world. So I want you to begin right at the start. And I just put back what the psalmist said in Psalm 139. The first verse that we looked at, if I'm not wrong, it's Psalm 13, is, you have created my conscience. You knit me together in my mother's womb. And I would like us to go back just to verse 13. Let's not go ahead. Let's just look at Psalm 13, verse 13. And maybe this is something that you have never taken time to take into your heart. You only know it in your mind. It's a lot of good knowledge, but it's not who I am. I don't know this. You may have come into the world because of your parents. Your mother physically carried you, took care of you, brought you into the world. But there is somebody else inside this picture. And we have never brought him into the picture. And that is the person who knit you together. The person who decided that you are going to come into the world. The person who decided that it's you who's going to live. We come from our pagan backgrounds where human beings can be just like flies. Life means nothing. Oh, another human soul. We live like that in India. Somebody died on the road, somebody. Another fly, another mosquito. We don't value every single life. It's only from the Bible that we find that every single life is valuable, which is why in our Jewish faith, life is most precious. Human life is very valuable. So the commandments that we have to love God and love our neighbor as ourselves, these two basic commandments that all of the Torah rests upon, we cannot obey that. Because if we are people who hate ourselves, judge ourselves, treat ourselves badly, then that is the way we're going to treat other people also. If we have no respect for ourselves as being created by God, we also will not have that respect for other human people, other lives around us. So right at the start, I want us to go through a prayer. Some of you may not want to go through this because you're like, Pastor Susan, you're just bringing up a lot of pain. You're raking up everything. Let me just encourage you. Draw close to God, and He will draw close to you. Our problems that seem like mountains are pieces of dust to the Creator. So we don't want to run away from these things now. I'm not bringing up pain. I'm bringing you to the doctor. I'm bringing you to the healer. He is the one who heals. He is the one who rectifies. And so you don't need to be afraid of the King. He is a gracious King, which is why we always pray Psalm 136. For His loving kindness is forever. For His grace is forever. He's a gracious King. So pray with me. What we're going to do now is ask God to forgive us for not accepting His authority in our life in creating us and rejecting ourselves, and in the process rejecting God. So like we pray usually, just repeat the prayer after me. You can say the words that I say to help you pray, but it's your prayer to God. And we're praying together. And this is so exciting. We're praying all over the world. So as we unite ourselves all over the world to pray this, may we deliver not only ourselves, may there be deliverance not just for us, but like a net, we pray all over the world. Let the body of Messiah come out. So as you and I pray together, I'm going to see this like links. And we're praying, yes, for our unbelief and our sin of hatred towards ourselves and God. But as we're repenting of that today and saying we're not going to do this anymore, in the power of Messiah, we're going to create a link, a chain, and it's going to become like a net, and we're going to take the body of Messiah out of this. So with that faith, let's pray. Heavenly Father, please forgive me today for denying your authority in the world, for denying your kingship. Forgive me for believing all the lies of the enemy about who I am. I'm choosing out of my free will to forgive every person who has knowingly and unknowingly taught me negative messages about myself. Every person who has rejected me or cursed me, I'm choosing to forgive them today. And I release them. And I cancel all their debts to me. They owe me nothing. I will not hold this bitterness towards anybody who has rejected me. I come out of agreement in the name of Yeshua. I come out of agreement with every spirit of self-hatred and self-rejection. Father, forgive me for holding on to these lies. Spirit of God, I welcome you. I invite you to govern my thoughts. Teach me the ways of the Father. And teach me how to serve you with my whole being. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made, and my soul knows it well. Well, I can't see you, but I, with all of my heart, know that something has happened. And I am very sorry that we can't continue because this is a 1-hour session that we've even crossed time. But it is my prayer that you all would rise up with us and we take these powerful truths of God's word, of our mighty King, and walk into freedom. Nothing is impossible with God. Even if till today you thought of ending your life, even till today, if you entertain that lie that you are useless, even if you committed sin and being angry with yourself today, I want you to know that there is hope in the Messiah. There is hope in the Messiah. I really wish that we were there physically to help each one of you. But I am believing that God has a plan, that if we start on this journey worldwide and we're doing it online, then God's going to help us complete this. And let that happen in the name and the merit of our wonderful Messiah, Yeshua, who came into the world to show us the way of salvation and has brought us from the nations into the family of God. We have come from many pagan backgrounds where these are the mindsets that we may have inherited, but we want to be like our father, Abraham, who crossed over from being a Gentile to becoming a man right with God, who walks with God. That's what you and I want to do. This is your calling. This is your destiny. Don't give it up for anybody. Don't sell it away. Hold on to it. You need any help? Contact us at office@bethlehem.com. You just want us to pray, but you don't want to say what it is. You can just drop us a line. Please support me in prayer. You want to ask more questions? You can ask us questions. But the best deal that you can get is to buy the book, which is, it's got hours of detail inside of it. The book is The Biblical Foundations of Freedom by Art Matthias, and you can get it at our store. And if you live in the US and you're not able to order from our store, just contact us at office@bethlehem.com and we will tell you how you can get the book. If you live on the other side of the world, just send us an email. We already had some emails and we were so blessed to be able to lead them to where they could get the book because they weren't able to order it from here. So please send us an email. Don't let that be a reason why you're not buying the book. We have answers for that too. And so we're so excited. We're so blessed. I am so blessed by the session because I know that God has done something. And this is a season of redemption. This is a season of miracles. And you need to see you're not all by yourself on an island. You are part of the body of Messiah. And we're here for victory. We're here for power. We're here to get ourselves ready to bring redemption to the whole world. So Shabbat Shalom to everyone. We're going to another very special Shabbat this weekend, so Shabbat just before Pesach. Hold on to your seats. We're coming to you live tomorrow at 5 o'clock, where Pastor Joseph will tell you wonderful word from Hashem for this season. Don't miss tomorrow. And don't miss Shabbat morning at 9 a.m., where we have another very special guest from another part of the world. And God is doing something all over the world. And what are we doing? We're showing you, we're pulling you, we're drawing you to become part of the larger body of Messiah, where we're called to victory. And on Saturday afternoon at 3 p.m., we have Shine Your Light, where you have the practical way of putting this into practice. Thank you for everyone who's sharing with us. But please do send us an email if you've not been keeping in touch with us. We would love to hear from you. Shabbat Shalom, and we'll see you tomorrow.
ישוע בכל ליבי רוצה להידמות יותר רק לדמותו בכל מילה מבט וכוונת הלב בכל מחשבה אליו להידמות אל דמות ישוע בכל ליבי רוצה להידמות יותר רק לדמותו כל כישרונות ידי אניח לפני פודי בכל פועלי אליו להידמות להידמות רק לישוע להידמות לבן עליון לתת לרוחו לפעול ברצונו כל יום להידמות